that's probably what's holding me back from doing it, because of the fear of rejection. And you'll make sure you've got a pen and paper, because you're going to want to write some notes. Big wide world here, and I was in a bubble. I was definitely in a bubble, the Cheshire bubble. Finding happiness is not something that you can find in anyone else but you, is there?
What do you think it was for you, and where do you think it came from?
That has pulled me back to many different memories in my life, you know. But I think the biggest thing for me has been
So I was delighted to have Leanne Brown on the podcast, and she shares so honestly on this podcast stuff you guys would have never heard before. Early childhood, family, future, and of course the real housewives of Cheshire. So enjoy listening to this podcast. Well, Leanne, welcome on the podcast. It's so lovely to have you.
Thank you for having me.
And we were just talking about Yin Yoga and that the fact you're doing it. How are you finding it?
I'm absolutely loving it. It is so fascinating. Just learning more about the body, and I can't say this probably, the anatomical side of it.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
And you're kind of connecting with your body, feeding into your emotion, spirituality.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Everything that's connected. I've done shiatsu massage course as well. Okay. So that's all about the meridian lines in the body and the pressure points. Then that's then connected to the myofascial lines with regards to the Yin Yoga in the positions. Because with the Yin, you hold the positions for 2 to 7 minutes. And just that, the holding them positions and the release of the myofascia like creates space and releases trauma that we store in the body. And just, I've been an emotional wreck.
So an interesting time to do this then.
Yeah, well, not today. I think I've had to not allow myself to like get so like into it this evening, because after each teaching, and she does a yin practice for an hour, so that's why we've all experienced like different releases. But I think I had to keep switched on, like I just said. If you'd had me yesterday, I'd have been literally like...
It's interesting because I think you're connecting with your emotions, what's gone on, your experiences, to your body, and really all of us are disconnected to a degree, and taking that time for yourself will always lead you to know yourself better, and it's always a great investment. So it's great that you've done that, and I'm looking forward to hearing some of your journey. And so so you know, obviously I've heard of you for some time. I know that originally I probably knew you from the Real Housewives of Cheshire. You were on it for 6 seasons, is that right? An original cast member?
Yeah, that's right.
Tell me how that was.
It was an interesting part of my life. Yeah. It was... a bit of
I know you're very different now.
Yeah.
But, you know, how was that?
Being on the show? Yeah. It was fun at first. It was a group of friends. I knew most of the girls, embarking on something new and quite exciting, even though there was... few people that were very apprehensive about me doing it, that I'm close to in my life, because of the reputation that Real Housewives had. It's a lot of arguing and bitching. If you've seen the other ones in America previously, before the Cheshire one came out, and so it was something that I went into just feeling like I'm just going to be myself. You know, people are just going to be me. So how can they twist things the way, you know, if I don't give them anything, sort of thing. But I learned very quickly that they're very clever at doing that.
I think on every show, I've interviewed quite a few people on shows, and in almost every show there is a certain degree of what they show in the camera and what they try and put on is to cause a little bit of stress and drama.
Yeah. And then the way they edit things as well. So, but you kind of like, you get to the gist of, we're creating an entertainment show inevitably. And sadly, people thrive off that negative, like the negative side of it, like the arguing and stuff, and it makes it spicy and exciting. But, and so an element of you sort of, you know, invest in that side of it as well, and think, well, I'm going to give a little. And whereas in normal life, you wouldn't go around to all of your friends' houses and talk about something that you've had a word with somebody, but you know, you're creating a TV show. But personally for me, I struggled towards the end because there was a lot going on that wasn't being told on the show. So I had to call it a day after 6 because it just got too much for me. So yeah, it was a breakdown of a relationship. Anyone that's watched the show will know what I'm talking about. Not going too much into it because although I'm so grateful that I embarked on the journey of being on the show, because it really created such a shift in my life that made me realize the people around me, the ones that were real friends and the ones that weren't, and it made me really stand back and pull away from what wasn't right for me. It wasn't serving me, you know.
Yeah, this is really for me to focus on you and your journey, rather than any particular dynamic.
Yeah.
But when you left, it was really interesting because it sounds like any experience, it's been positive and negative for you. But you said it was affecting me and my family, and that's why I left. So it sounded like it was a connection, relationship issue. Just it put you under stress.
Definitely. I remember towards the end of the show, I talk about actually the last series that I did, and we were in Gibraltar, and we were on the boat. It was like it's called Sun something. It's a hotel boat that's always in the dock on the whatever.
I kind of get the
thing. And we were filming on. It was like 2:00 in the morning, and the cameras were rolling, and they just wanted an out. They wanted an exciting end part. So it just got to the point where I was like, what are we doing? Yeah. Like, why are we doing this to ourselves? And somebody was crying and somebody was arguing. And you know, when you sort of come outside of your body and look into the situation, and I visualized myself just getting up and jumping off the side of the boat. And that's when I thought, this isn't for me anymore. It's not fun anymore. You know, it's not, I need to get out of it. Like mentally. And when I was on the reunion, it was just crazy. Like, I ended up picking a plastic bottle and throwing it at one of the girls. Had to be like,
you seem really zen, actually.
Yeah, well, no, this is how it got me, and I know that's not me. You. So I've got a fiery side, like who hasn't, you know? But it pushed me to that point, and I didn't like who I was becoming, or who it was making me become. So I was actually being restricted and being taken off set, and I knew at that point I was definitely not coming back. It's the end.
I think when we're put under stress, I've said this before, you get fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah, this is what I've been learning about the dorsal nerve. The what's it? The
vagal nerve. And sympathetic system.
Yeah, the ventral vagus nerve. That's it. The social engagement system. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah,
fascinating.
I mean, so when you have either vagal or sympathetic, it's interesting because you go into survival mode. So I'm very clear when you talk about a situation, you don't want to be throwing a bottle or being able to be restrained, but you go into this survival situation of why is this happening? Well, it's
fight.
We don't have lions. Well, actually, in the UK, I'll say we don't have lions eating us, but our whole body and emotions are trained off a survival instinct. But our threats now come socially.
What? Say that again.
Our threats come socially, rather than the lion coming around the corner.
Yeah.
And so we react to these threats like they're real threats. And that's actually normal. We obviously can learn to handle it differently, tread differently, which is I kind of see is on what has happened on your journey. But I did want to start with this because I think it's a really interesting journey where, you can acknowledge now, look, hey, this is not what I wanted to be. And I had the courage to step away from that environment, which is, we all have to step away from environments that aren't serving us at sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. It's like your body doesn't know, like you say, whether it's you're going to get attacked by a bear or it's just under stress that, like you say, it isn't life-threatening. Yeah. But it was the best thing I did. And leaving the show, I wanted to do the opposite to the environment I was in. So I got in touch with Jean Anderson, who did my hypnobirth with my third child, and then ended up travelling to Kenya and working with a charity for female genital mutilation, forced marriage and gender-based violence. And that was just like just a complete humbling experience from the life that I'd led.
Yes, of course.
And also the environment being, I mean, it's in effect, it's a show exploiting wealth in Cheshire, in an affluential place, isn't it? So it really...
And people's insecurities.
Yeah, well, yeah, that as well, yeah. Massive insecurities, yeah. But it really made me see, wow, this is a big wide world here. And I was in a bubble. I was definitely in a bubble, the Cheshire bubble. And it made me just look outside that and see a different way of life, and a very humbling experience. I'm very grateful.
It's a big change. So you went to Kenya. What was the charity called again? Remind me.
One Woman at a Time.
Yeah, I've got that here. Yeah, perfect. So tell me about the charity.
So Jean, I love her dearly, she's amazing. She did my hypnobirthing, like I said, and the reason why I got in touch with Jean about hypnobirthing is because I just really wanted to tell my story with that, because I'd had 2 not great births, and the experience I had with that was just incredible. So I thought, if I can try and empower women in that way, and then obviously divine timing and the way things happen, she said, I've just been to Kenya, and I've been working with a grassroots charity, learning more about FGM and the cultural relation to it and what goes on. So having 3 girls of my own, I was like, wow, like that's incredible. It's barbaric, the thing that it still goes on in this day and age, and it is worldwide as well. It's not just in Kenya. But she told me a story. We'd go in there, and then she met a lady who had 6 children. She died in childbirth, and the 2 of the girls that were left behind, the father was going to sell to marriage and have them cut. So she stopped him doing that and said, I'll pay for the schooling. And when I got back in touch with Jean after, because it was a few years before that she'd been there with Lola for the hypnobirth, I said, well, you need to start a charity. And I was it was coming to the end of the show, so I must have had that like intuition that I was moving forward or moving away from the show. I was doing a parachute jump on the last series, so I said, I'm doing it for a different charity called Once Upon a Smile. So I said, you need to start your own charity. And sort of we did it together, so I spurred her on to do it, and then I started raising money for the charity. And obviously when I went to Kenya, we found all these other girls that needed sponsoring, and then came back and did a couple of charity balls for the charity, and I've been sort of involved with it since then.
It's a big shift.
Yeah.
How did it feel, the shift?
It felt good. It felt really good, because there's nothing more rewarding in life than doing something for others, is there? Really, that's what makes us the most happy.
I think you're on that journey, isn't it, where you were doing something for you, and then you did something for others. I read a quote, and I want to read it out. So you've said on your Instagram, when you realise that the one relationship in your life that needs the most attention, love, kindness, respect and compassion, is the one with yourself, your life will improve dramatically. Talk to me about that.
Well, self-love, isn't it? Self-love, self-acceptance and judgment is a massive thing I've struggled with. Being on the show, the responses that you get from people that don't know anything about you, that was hard. At first it was real hard, because it's just not nice to have people making judgment about you, is it? But I think we're our worst critic for ourselves, and we judge ourselves more than anything. So it's that finding happiness is not something that you can find in anyone else but you, is there? And it's not something that you can have continuously. And I, again, openly speak about that materialistic side of life that I was so heavily invested in, or sort of like encapsulated in that bubble. I was searching for something to fill a hole inside of me that couldn't be filled from anything external, which no one can really fill themselves up through happiness and joy from anything external, really, that is sustainable anyways.
Of course.
Yeah, so that was...
It's fleeting.
Yeah, of course. So I was buying things, buying everything, I always say that my wardrobe was like blooming Narnia, you could get lost in there, but there's always labels on things everywhere. So I've obviously decompressed my wardrobe massively, but it was just a need for things that were never going to fill the hole. So that was sort of coming away from the show, doing the charity work, then just learning more, like reading self-help books and learning more about the mind, the body. Like you said earlier, we live in our head, don't we? We're not connected to our body, and all the experiences that we have in our life affect us in many different ways, and we hold that within our body. It causes stress, dis-ease, and just learning about the connection and actually just being able to stop. Just stop and breathe. It's the simplest thing on the planet and the most overlooked thing for every single person.
It's coming to the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so many of us are caught up in the past or the future or what we need to do or what we should have done.
Yeah.
But actually coming into the present and the moment and living in that present moment, as you say, is probably often the answer to a lot of, whether it's stress or unease. Something very difficult to do unless you're aware.
Yeah.
And often we're not aware. And it sounds like for a bit of your life you weren't aware.
For a lot of it.
When I look at this materialistic, entrapment that is so easy to get into, and often, as you said, it's trying to fill a hole. That hole can be one of a whole host of things. I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, feeling insecure about yourself, and whether that's physically or mentally or emotionally. What do you think it was for you, and where do you think it came from? Big reflection on my journey so far that has pulled me back to many different memories in my life, but I think the biggest thing for me has been rejection. And that's come from my dad. My dad left when I was 13. He was I seen him be physically abusive to my mum on a couple of occasions. He worked away a lot, so he wasn't learning again about what attachments we have. You mentioned attachment as well, didn't you? I think I have anxiety attachment, because my dad was sort of in and out of my life even when I was younger, and I was a bit of a daddy's girl. I used to do gymnastics, and I had this memory that when my dad I'd won like loads of different medals and won the competition, and my dad and my mum, we were all in the car, and he was singing "We Are the Champions," the Queen song, that "We are the champions," and I just remember thinking how amazing my dad was, and that memory just sticks in my mind. But there's so many other things that then have come to me since then, like the way he spoke to my mum, and the way, he wasn't there all the time, and the way he spoke to us sometimes, and I'm sure there was a lot of moments, there was a lot of lovely moments in my childhood, but ultimately, I think when he left didn't to go around the corner, he left to go to the Philippines, could have been working over there, which he still lives in the Philippines now. I've not spoke to him for 16 years. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. He's got a new life, new wife, and a son. I have met them, but they were born when I was 30. I went there when I was 30 to the Philippines, and he came back that year, and then had a big argument. Anyways, that realization of it's funny because I've actually been playing a lot around with the idea of getting back in touch with him recently, and again because of the journey that I'm on, and making peace with that, because I feel like it's probably going to keep coming up unless I deal with it. But yeah, I think the rejection part has been the thing that's when I talk about that, when you're saying what it was for me, the relationship, how it affects me. I've lost my way now, haven't I?
No, not at all. I think when we look at what can lead to that hole that we try and fill with many things, that some are healthy, some unhealthy. I believe, some don't, but I believe often quite a degree of it comes from childhood, especially if there was childhood trauma. 13, you're coming into womanhood, your whole safety mechanism is based around your family, and not everyone has had that, but the family archetypal model is a mum and dad and loving and maybe brothers and sisters. Now, for a mum and dad to have a difficult relationship is one thing, but for a dad to leave the country at 13, that's a dramatic impact on a 13-year-old. What happened to you? How did you cope?
Well, just like anything you do. My mum's amazing. Like, my mum's incredible. She had 3 jobs. She didn't want us to give up our home, the home that we were living in. So she worked all the hours God send, in the daytime, at the weekends, in a bar. So she wasn't at home a lot. Again, stems back to probably that avoidant attachment. But we lived in a little village. It was a lovely childhood with regards to like the surroundings and everything. I had a lot of friends, but I haven't really told many people this. So I met a guy. I think I was about 15, and was I 15? 14, 15, the ages, I can't remember, but I was obsessed with him. Like, I think he was a bit older than me, and I remember him always promising to me to be picking me up, and then he'd always let me down, and it turned out he had a girlfriend, and he said he was going to finish with it, and I just, that again, the rejection. So obviously it pulls you back then, doesn't it? And I had these paracetamol in my drawer, and I was my friend had an overdose. Like, she took all these paracetamols and she ended up going to hospital to have her stomach pumped. Her mum and dad had split up, and she did it because she wanted them to get back together. And we're like, this was such a weird thing, obviously, because I was young and stupid. Not stupid, but like grasping onto something that would sort of bring him home.
Of course.
And then sort of...
Well, you're hoping he'd care.
Yeah. And the guy that I was sort of seeing probably tipped me over the edge, and one night at the Monday night youth club, I ended up taking the tablets and told somebody straight away, because it wasn't it was just a bit of a cry for help. I wanted my dad to come home, and I had to go to hospital, and they gave me horrible medicine and made me be sick all night. And I just remember how awful they made me feel the next day. And I think about this now, because of the mental health issue with like young people now. It's crazy, but they come around the next day and they talk to you, the psychologist or whatever, and saying that wasted them the time.
Did they?
Because like, it was clear that I didn't want to die when I did it, but they felt like that obviously it was just, I was time wasting, and it's sort of stuck in my mind a little bit. It's quite shocking, that, isn't it, really?
I think
my dad didn't come home, by the way.
No. I think for me, I talk about perpetuating childhood trauma a bit, and when your father leaves you and you go into a new relationship, it sounds like this guy was a little bit older, felt good to be with him, but it probably was a relationship you were likely to get rejected again. You probably knew that, and innately that will cause a really high degree of chemistry, because if you can master that rejection, you don't feel rejected. And so often we can perpetuate our childhood traumas by picking people that would ultimately, if it's rejection, reject us, and when they don't, we feel great, but when they do, they were probably the character that was always going to reject. And it sounds like you were doing that, and I'm actually not a big fan of the cry for help saying, and I think it's been used as underplaying what is someone who's maladaptive coping. You don't know how to cope. So what do you do when you don't know how to cope? You don't make good decisions. That doesn't mean you've wasted anyone's time, doesn't mean you've done something wrong. Your mind, who you are, is not coping with life. And so you've taken paracetamol, you then told someone. That doesn't mean you've wasted anyone's time, doesn't mean it wasn't real. You're not coping. And I think it's a problem, really, because we don't know how to tell people we're not coping.
Well, that's where addiction stems from, isn't it? It's a way of coping, isn't it? Inevitably. It's probably addictions. Well, Gabor Mate, heard of him, says about addiction saves people's lives in effect, although it's not ideal, but it stops them from actually killing themselves, doesn't it? Because it's a way of coping.
And this is what I kind of say, like, addiction's way of coping, and it's also it's a cry for connection rather than a cry for help. Really, what you wanted is your dad home, and you didn't know how to do it, and part of you in your mind, I'm not saying all of you, but a small part of you didn't want to go on living without him there, you know, and that's why probably you took the paracetamol, and then you realise, well, you do want to go on living, and there's hope, but there's also, you know, bits that aren't great, that, you know, and so...
Not taking anywhere, just sorry to put in, in fact, just thinking about my mum was incredible, and we had a really good relationship. I was like that with my mum, you know, we were like best mates, but it's funny how that need for him to come back.
It's the anxious attachment,
you
know, where you're needing connection, you know, you're looking for it, and you're very sensitive when it's not there, whether it's him or someone else who you try to replace that kind of loss with. So you've gone through, which is really a very, very horrible thing when you're very young at 13, followed up with not really a great relationship, where someone really lied to you. So you've gone from someone leaving you to then someone lying to you about probably one of the most important things, your relationship with them. What then happened then?
I mean, I wasn't seeing that guy that long. You know, it was like a fleeting thing in time. So he wasn't like the cause of...
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it was obviously the... then I met a guy and moved to the other side of the country when I was 16. When I think now, my girls... Well, Hallie's 20, and she's only just moved to Leicester doing at uni. Lily is 15. Oh, God. I think what I put my mum through leaving at 16. And then he turned out to be abusive. And just, is it because I was witness to that in the home environment that I sort of accepted it? Or that's... Well, I know that's not obviously always the case, but I put up with it for 18 months. Again, when I met this guy, I was like, had that need, I wanted to be whisked off my feet. And I remember it was when I was like raving. I used to go raving, and we used to go to the Rivington services.
Okay. Is that where the rave was?
Yeah.
I missed out.
After the rave, there was a big after party on the services, and everyone used to get the bonnets and put the bonnets up with all the speakers and went on till dawn, and a friend of mine that I had met through the raving had met this guy, and he had this fancy car, and he lived in Halifax, and I was like, wow, and she was so in love with him, and she looked really cool, and I was like, I really want to have a boyfriend like that. I want to have that, I want to be whisked off my feet. And then I met this guy who was a bit of a jack the lad, and anyways, turned out he was a car thief. He had this fancy car, and he nicked it. Wasn't quite what I'd hoped for, but ended up moving to the other side of the country with him because he was having to go to court for all these cars he'd nicked. And then obviously I was isolated.
You wanted to be love bombed, didn't you?
And then very quickly realised that he wasn't very good for me either. So I was in that relationship with no mobiles. So when I rang my mum, I rang her from the telephone box. Remember those? And then she would set off on the motorway.
Of course.
And then she'd stop. Are you okay? Because I'd be like, come pick me up. He's hit me and da-da-da. Again, what I've put my mum through, it just doesn't even bear thinking about having children of my own now, daughters, and think, oh my God. But then I'd say, it's fine, he's apologised, you can turn around. So she never actually got to pick me up. In the end, she did the best thing she probably could have ever done for me and said, I can't do this for you. You need to do it on your own, because then I know that you're serious about leaving. 18 months later, I finally plucked up the courage to do it. And the power that I felt inside of myself, because when I actually stood up against him, he fell to the floor like a child having a tantrum. It was very fun, quite funny now when I think about it to watch. Don't go. And I remember the feeling when I walked out the door. The only thing I was gutted about was that I had to leave my dog. But felt so empowered that I'd done that. That was sort of a real pivotal moment in my life, like courage, empowerment.
Yeah, it sounds like a difficult situation, and I think with everything that happened, it is quite easy to ignore red flags. We all talk about red flags, and actually there's probably more awareness of red flags now than a few years ago. But it's still very hard to act on red flags, because especially if you've been rejected, you'll want to make a relationship work no matter what, and you feel a bit lost outside relationships. Like a lot of people say, I have to be with someone, I can't be alone. And those kind of things are really dangerous things, because, it kind of goes with what you said previously, like treating yourself with love, treating yourself with kindness, and like really putting yourself first. If you were doing that, you'd never just be with someone just for the sake of being with someone. And actually, you don't ignore red flags. But it is easy to, and I understand why you kind of did it, and it must take an amazing courage to get out of it. But it sounds like you had a real anchor in your mother.
Yeah, definitely. She's a strength in me, definitely. I've got that to thank for. So many things to thank for my mum.
It probably led you to a kind of secure attachment, actually, because, to actually leave that's kind of trusting in your mum, trusting in you, and that's kind of more of a secure attachment, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely, because where did I go? Back to my mum's.
Exactly.
Obviously, yeah. And she was there to pick up the pieces.
Yeah, which is normal, like
that's
you
what
would.
We do,
like you would. So just going back to your father for a second, and you talked about, well, do I need to reconnect with him? What would you hope for if you reconnected with him?
I've not learning the art of non-attachment, intention without attachment. The intention is just to contact him, to say what I've got to say, without the expectation is what I meant to say. The expectation of a reply, even.
Yeah, of course. I understand.
And that's probably what's holding me back from doing it, because of the fear of rejection. But I don't know. I've talked about it a few different times. And I remember writing a letter, actually, when when my dad moved away, he met somebody, and then he was writing letters to me, and then they went all a bit skew-whiff, and apparently he'd met somebody who'd nicked his money, and then he'd gone a bit off the rails, and he was like quite depressed, and then he just stopped. He stopped writing to me, and then I stopped writing to him, and so I've written this big long letter and about what had happened to me and everything. I didn't think I'd sent it, but when I went over to see him, he told me I did. But that was after we'd had a big argument. Me and my brother had a big argument, and anyways, it's going on. Well, we were. I'll tell you. Me and my brother went over there on the 30th year, and we ended up arguing over chocolates or something, and we started arguing on the floor, like physically fighting. And my dad just sat there and was like, "This is what happens when I'm working and I'm in India and I've seen people fight in the street like this." I'm like, "We're your children. We're not just people fighting in the street." And then we went off, and then me and my brother made up, and then I was like, couldn't get my head round that he would allow us just to do that. And I couldn't get my head round that he'd stopped writing to me at the time, and just sort of left it. And his answer was, "Well, you didn't write to me." And as a parent, that hurt, because there's no way I would pull back from my daughters if they were in a different country or whatever, I would keep fighting for them. As a parent, I feel like that you just wouldn't you? And he just sort of disconnected from it all. So
he does sound disconnected from it all.
Yeah. So it would only be for my own.
What would you want to say?
Have you heard of the Ho'oponopono?
No.
Ho'oponopono is a Hawaiian mantra and it's used to heal people. And the mantra is, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. Mm-hmm. And it works energetically to heal the part of you that you've allowed to be hurt, but also send that love back to that person that's done it, because we know that things that happen, it's always about what's going on in somebody else's life. If somebody's mean to you, if somebody's upset you, or if somebody's like, it's about what they're going through. Ultimately, it's not what you've done, unless you have done something awful. But so I think I would just like to sort of do that. Tell him.
What would you need to say sorry for, though?
It's just the mantra that I would like to say sorry for him. I'll tell you what, I'd like to say sorry for him, because I know he had a pretty shit life. His pet, as a child, I know he was beaten, and I know he probably put up with a lot as a child, just reflecting on different elements of our experiences and how they affect us. And I've been told that he was like, his dad was quite abusive. And that makes a lot of sense to me. So
it leads on to him being an abuser. Yeah.
I'm sorry that he's had to endure the things that he endured in life to make him react the way he did. And I forgive him.
Do you forgive him?
Thank you for, of course I do. And thank you for bringing me into the world. And I love you.
Why do you forgive him?
Why do I forgive him? Forgive him for leaving. Forgive him the way he treated my mum.
But why? Why?
Because it's only affecting me. If I don't forgive, it's affecting me. Because when you hold any discomfort in the body, that anything, guilt, anger, frustration, pain from our experiences, that creates dis-ease, doesn't it? So that's only hurting me. If I'm holding on to that, forgiveness is the most powerful tool you can do. And I do this at the retreats, we do a forgiveness meditation where we do cutting the emotional cords. So you think of whoever it is that's like been in your life and you've had an experience with, an unfortunate experience that you need to let go, because them emotional cords, just the triggers that then happen in our lives, keep pulling us back. So you do it in a visualization, energetically, thinking like them cords are there, even though we can't see them, energetically they're there. So we cut them in the visualization meditation. It's really powerful.
I think forgiveness is incredibly powerful. And I think people who truly kind of can forgive realise actually this is for me as much as it is for them, because it's people, the common saying is you're drinking poison when you keep out the bitterness there, isn't it? And so I can feel that you have forgiven him actually, just by talking to you, and I could also feel this was for you as really as much as it was for him. And I think it'd be powerful for him to understand that you've forgiven him, because I think no matter what kind of exterior you put up, if you leave your daughter at 13, you won't be feeling great about it, even if he doesn't want to say. And when I think about that position where you two probably needed a fatherly hand, he probably didn't have it in him. He probably didn't have the ability or the confidence in himself to go, I'm going to be the father now. And he probably was as father as he best could. That's, as you're saying, given the hands he was dealt, and some of us fight, you can sense when you probably do go towards the fight. Some people freeze. He probably flees, doesn't he? He probably runs. And I think he ran. He was under stress and he ran. But I think it's incredible that you can forgive him. And, it's interesting. I think it's powerful reaching out to someone, but I also think sometimes it's powerful writing that letter and you don't actually need to send it.
Exactly, yeah. I do that a lot as well, maybe I need to write another letter. Like talking to you now, I'm just thinking, this means I've probably got to do it. But then actually, energetically, can be just as powerful, can't it? Like I'm saying.
To do it serves you. Really it is for you. And if he's asking for forgiveness and he's wanting to chat, that's one thing. But sometimes you have something to say. But I actually think sometimes the most powerful self-actualization is when you do something and you can do it without the other person seeing, and yet you receive it. You're not looking to work them out. You're not looking for the answers. You're not looking for the response. You're looking to say what you needed to say, and then it's done.
Yeah.
Then it's done. Because, as you say, like these cords was a good analogy. You hold on to things, and they can be like chains pulling us back. So I think that's really, really interesting. Talk to me about your relationship with your 3 daughters. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about your relationship with your 3 daughters.
Yeah, they're amazing. They're so good. I'm so grateful that I've got 3 girls, and seeing them growing up and to young ladies now.
Yeah.
Like Hallie's 20, Lilia's 15, and Lola's 11.
Lovely.
Yeah. So, and they are close. I mean, they have the moments. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, they're all doing really well. I'd taken them out of school with all the craziness and spoke openly about them being in different groups and different conscious classroom at the one Lola had gone to, but she was a lot older than the other kids, and then she wanted to experience secondary school, because do they call it secondary school still? Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah,
maybe wrong.
But so yeah, she's ended up going back to school, and I'm glad actually she's gone back, and I don't want to get my opinions about the whole madness that happened, but the education system, looking at that in itself, it's like prehistoric in my opinion. There's so many things that need to change in that system, and I do feel like there is, like, if you don't fit into that shape that the education system creates, then you are seen as less than, or when you think about how they put you in groups and sets and label it, and it's like, what's the saying, if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, it'll spend its whole life thinking it's stupid. Like my girls are, well, Hallie wasn't very academic, but she was very creative. She's a dancer. She's now at uni doing dance. And yeah, Lilia's like, she always hated school. Like she never liked going to school. She didn't have like loads of friends. So I'd taken them both out when like COVID came about and everything. And because I didn't want her to wear a mask, and she definitely wasn't going to be vaccinated, and I pulled them out. I didn't like the isolation of her being the person that was one of the only ones that wasn't, because I didn't agree with wearing them anyways. And I had murders with the headmaster, and like my opinion and my research and everything, didn't agree. So so she's now being tutored at home doing GCSEs, because she's obviously doing GCSEs, and so she's doing it online. Lola's gone back and absolutely hates it. She likes the social aspect of it, but it's like talking about what we're talking about, mindfulness, yoga. These kids could benefit so much from doing a meditation, or a yoga is meditation, isn't it? And especially working on the Yin Yoga postures. It's not even a real strenuous activity. It's a slow and it's controlled, but it's releasing things that are being created from their experiences. And there's so many kids that just need that time and space, like working on stopping and breathing and coping mechanisms. That's what it would give them. The
education system probably doesn't talk much about coping systems, emotional regulation. Although I did okay in the academic world, I've always felt academia has been probably portrayed in a bit of a different way. So I've always been good with memory, good with numbers, but I wasn't very good with English. I probably had some mild dyslexia, but no one ever diagnosed me, and I always felt like I was behind. And I used to, unfortunately for me, my memory and could cope with it. But, I remember in medical school not feeling good enough. But as soon as I got into the real world, where it wasn't this academic grading at the end of each year, I thrived. Because someone wasn't grading me, someone wasn't telling me where I wasn't good enough. Instead, you get to carve out your own life.
Yeah.
And so I kind of see the point regarding schooling, university, where we define academia in many different ways. In a very unilateral way, but really it's many different ways, and people thrive in different ways. That's why we see some very successful business people didn't get A levels or GCSEs, which exactly. So academia will be interesting to see how it evolves. I think it has to evolve.
Yeah, let's hope so.
I think it does. And so, how is, with everything in mind, talking about relationships, how is your relationship with your girls?
Oh, perfect.
Is
yeah,
it?
Yeah, amazing.
So you've got a very close relationship.
Yeah. I mean,
I guess you were close to your mum as well, weren't you?
Yeah, of course. They think I'm a bit weird.
Do they? In what way?
Well, they've obviously seen a big journey that I've been on. From going from shopping all the time. Actually, I always talk about Hallie saying, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" When she got asked, and she said, "A shopper like Mummy," because that's all she'd seen me do.
Brilliant.
So I was like, maybe I need to change something about this, because I've wanted them to aspire to be more than a shopper. So then I embarked on doing the children's clothing, Kiss Frogs, and then I got offered the show. So obviously that, and then with the doing the sketching with the kids' clothing, Lilia got asked what she wanted to do, and she was like, a fashion designer.
Lovely.
And then
that's what my 8-year-old wants to be.
Really. And then Lola. Obviously I've written a self-help journal when I left the show, Grace, Gratitude, Grit, and then Lola did a piece at school, and she'd written it about believe in yourself, you can do anything, and all this like little like a little journal, like journaling positive things, and that just really makes you see how much your children take note of what you do, but not what you say.
Yeah. I think but I agree, what you do is probably the most important,
most impactful. Definitely,
whether they say it at the time or not.
Yeah,
children watch.
Yeah, I mean, I have all that, like I have a bit, especially now because I'm so busy, I have that mum guilt, like I'm not spending enough time with them, and I think because they get into that age now where like they are that teenager stage. Lilia's sort of coming out of it now, and Hallie didn't really go through it. She went through a phase of like going to a room and staying in there and then coming out, oh hello, do you still live here? Lola is now sort of reaching that. She's 11 now, she's gone to school, and she's getting a bit of an attitude and a bit of a sass pants, and
I'm not ready for that. My 8-year-old, I'm not ready.
Well,
people see, I know, everyone tells me. Yeah, I'm not ready for it at all.
Oh, it'll hit you in the face like a spade, trust me.
That's what everyone says. Yeah.
But they're good kids, and they're grounded, considering the life they've had, and even though I'm still screaming at them to pick up the stuff and tidy the room, and but yeah, they are really good kids, and they get on.
How did they react to the split of the marriage?
It's been it's been okay, actually. They've handled it really well, but I think because of the way it was done, it wasn't like they seen us like playing happy families, and then one day we sat them down and was like, this is happening. It was sort of a real slow transition. They seen that we weren't sleeping in the same room and stuff like that, and obviously we had arguments like in front of them sometimes, but they sort of knew without us having the conversation, and until we did. Do you know what I mean? They obviously picked up on it, but I think they just seen that natural like separation, if you will. It wasn't like an instant thing. They just thought, oh, something's going on here. And then obviously I've spoke to them and said, like, are you okay? And the biggest thing, the best thing is that they can see that we're happy, and they see what I'm doing, and seeing how it's making me feel, and seeing my journey as well. And also we get on. We still get on really well. And
that's great.
Yeah. And that's like the best thing I can show them, is that if that does happen in your life, you know, you can still be friends.
Yeah.
And that's been a real beautiful thing, actually. And I'm so grateful. He's an amazing dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's an amazing dad. And it's just been we've just grown apart. It's actually, it's been a long time. And it's still like, it's a bit of a grieving process you sort of go through, which I'm still sort of going through. It's only been March I moved out. So yeah, so
it's not long.
No. But again, like I'm saying, it was a progression. It wasn't like...
Of course,
yeah.
I understand.
So, yeah.
Still a big change.
It's a massive change, yeah, and still coming to terms with it. And I'll always love him, do you know, because brought 3 girls in the world together, and yeah, he's... but he's okay, and, you know, it's nice that we can still, you know, be in each other's company, and we can eat out with the girls, and we can go cinema, and we can do things, you know.
I think it does matter. I mean, I think co-parenting, I know you're making it sound a bit easy, but I think it's very, very difficult, and people find it difficult.
Yeah, of course.
But I think, and I know it's not easy, by the way, even the way you make it sound, I know for you even, it's probably complex communication and making sure you guys stay friendly.
Yeah. Well, this is the early days. I mean, we haven't moved on yet. So I think that'll be the next sort of like, okay, this is now different. You know, I know it's there's going to be bumps in the road, probably. I hope that there isn't.
Life has bumps, doesn't it?
Exactly.
It's how we cope with them.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, was that, did the drifting happen for any particular reason, or were you just not getting on, communicating?
Yeah, it was just the directions of life, really. I think just the things that Wes went to Sunderland, and he was there for 5 years, and I was going to move with him, and then he was like, well, I'm going to be coming back all the time. And I think that separation, that for that amount of time, must have had some sort of impact. And also I started doing the show then, and obviously wasn't keen on me doing the show either. I didn't really want to be part of it. And I think because I'd embarked on that journey, that's sort of like, he didn't want to be connected to that part of what I was doing. So them choices I've got to live with, like, that's probably affected our relationship as well. And obviously the fact that I didn't move to Sunderland, because if I'd have moved to Sunderland, I wouldn't have been on the show. No. So, you know, things happen, choices. But you know, I mean, they happen, and what happens is happening for you, not, you know, not to you, and you've just got to deal with things as they come along. And the more I sort of delved into myself, the more I felt disconnected.
No, I can see it was a journey where it sounds like the Real Housewives of Cheshire for you was a big moment in your life, because it really made you look at yourself. It made you look at your communication. It made you look at your coping, and it made you look, I think you really had to answer the question, what do I want with life? Who do I want to be? And I think that culminated with you leaving. Yeah. And you're on the journey. I think, you know, we're all still on the journey to find ourselves and connect with ourselves. But I think that was a big moment for you, where you then left, and it looks like from then you've done a lot of self-care, self-help, but
soul searching.
Yeah, you're connecting with yourself, trying to find yourself. You know, I've done that myself, and it's funny. I've gone on lots of journeys through, you know, reflecting on trauma, reflecting on decisions that I can reflect now and say they were bad, but at the time they were the best coping decisions I could have made. It's who I was at that time made that decision, and it's funny when I look at all those things, it does help me understand myself. But really, I think I still am in the process of understanding myself, you know,
Does it
who
ever
I
end?
am. I don't think it does. I think it, you know, all journeys in life probably leads back to yourself. And I think that's being selfish. I think ultimately, I think loads of us don't really know who we are and what we want. And it leads to these kind of journeys where we reflect on things. And, you know, I can see you're doing a lot of self-awareness work, and that self-awareness work will help you decide who you are in that moment and what decisions you want to make. And I can see you're on a healing journey, and I think it's fantastic. And I think I can see it's a work in progress. So am I, you know. And it's always a difficult thing to do because a lot of us say we don't have time, you know, or I don't want to do it. But it will definitely benefit. It always benefits spending time with you and how you are.
Life's impermeable, isn't it? It's ever changing. So, and we are ever changing. And I think because of the journey that I've been on, and it's like that need to, I wanted to change him as well, you know, and that realization of I can't change somebody who's not willing to change. They have to do it for themselves. He's not my masterpiece. He's his own masterpiece.
That's
so
right.
I can only change me. And if that doesn't bring us, if that takes us further apart, then that's the way that life has taken us, you know. Not being, I'm still very grateful for the life that we've had together. And it's not been without its ups and downs. Obviously, it's been turbulent, like many times. But you know, it's just part of the journey, isn't it? And the learning.
I heard this analogy once, and it talked about relationship, and you talk about changing people. And I think, imagine 3 cushions. So I'll put 3 pieces of paper out here. So, you know, this is person A, this is person B, and this is the relationship, the cushion in the middle, and person A standing on this cushion, person B standing on this cushion, and there's the relationship cushion. You both step on to the relationship cushion, and that's where you join, that's where you coalesce, and you decide shared values, decide shared ambitions. But often what can happen is person A can force person A and B to step on person B's cushion, who is who they are, who they want to be, or vice versa, person B can force person A on that cushion. And when someone steps on someone else's cushion, which is their identity, and tries to change that, it only leads to disaster. But in a way, we all do it in relationships. We're all looking, and I think the most healthy space for any relationship is being on that middle cushion, where you're talking about the relationship, shared goals, rather than the person. And I think that's a real skill, actually, to actually being focused on the relationship in a non-personal way is probably the best thing, because challenging someone's identity and integrity is always a challenge, but we all do it, if I'm honest. And so just remind me of that, you know, because that can happen in any relationship. But the biggest success is staying in that middle bit, which is focused on the relationship, which is always tough.
That's interesting. Yeah. I think football, obviously, you sort of caught up in that whirlwind, and sort of they're the person that's like doing the football and in the limelight, and then obviously traveling, and you know, you're at home, and it's sort of being pulled along in life, really. And that obviously that's why I wanted to do something for me. Other than, which is fine. Just be a shopper.
You wanted to do something.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that. Real Housewives of Cheshire. I know you may have got some judgment and things like that, but it sounded like that was part of, I don't think you'd be where you are unless you did it.
No. Well,
it was part of yourself. It was part of your journey to find yourself.
Yeah, of course.
I think you had to do it, you know, and you left.
Yeah.
You know, it's a bit like the relationship, you know, although it was fleeting, you had to do it after your father, because you were trying to cope, you know, just part of life.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think it's a bad decision. I'm not sure I believe in really, unless you do something really abusive or illegal, decisions are decisions. And as long as you keep awareness, they lead to you discovering yourself better.
Absolutely.
You didn't want to be the person at home. You wanted to be seen. You wanted to be heard.
Yeah.
You wanted to be found. I get it.
Yeah. I did. I did.
So tell me, so you're doing quite a few things. You did your retreats. Mm-hmm. What's next for you?
What, other than the retreats, you mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, it could be the retreats. Explain it to me.
The retreats are like our baby, mine and Sophie's.
Yeah.
You know, we've
talk to me about it. What is it?
So it started with Jessica Cunningham. Mm. So I had Jess on my podcast, and I was like, I really want to do retreats. You know, I'd done my journal. I was doing meditation online, and just really wanted to. I'd done meditation in person as well. I'd been on a couple of different retreats, and like, I really want to do this. It's like I really want to help people, you know, get that connection. And oh gosh, I've learned so much in the last year. It's just crazy. So Jess was like, why don't we do a retreat together? Mm-hmm. So then we did. I went on her belief coding. So she's created the belief coding, which is, I don't know if you know much about that. It's a modality that she's created through different therapies that she's learned, and it's about what's the word? Recoding your beliefs, like your limiting beliefs, like figuring out what it is, going back into your childhood. And creating a healthy memory. It's amazing. So we did a retreat, the Divine Feminine, last November.
Okay, lovely.
The lady girl and friend, Sophie, that came on and did the chefing for us. Sophie is who I'm doing the retreats with now. Okay. So obviously Jess doing the belief coding, she's got 5 kids, and we were doing the retreats like every other month, and she was like, I can't do this.
Where was it?
So we did them different places around the UK. We were just like hiring different places. Uh-huh. And so we did like 3 of them. Was it 3 or 4? 3 retreats with Jess, and then she said, like, I can't keep going away for 4 days at a time, you know. So myself and Sophie decided to come together, and we did a couple of day retreats, and then we did one in Portugal in August. And now we've took on a residency in Arnside, which is, we're like renting, and we're actually putting it on Airbnb to rent as a stay. It's overlooking the bay in Arnside. It's beautiful. Lovely. The location. Only sleeps 6, but it's so it's a very intimate group. We've got one this weekend actually. We had our first men's one a couple of weeks ago, which went really well. But yeah, I'm just loving it. Sophie does the food. She's very knowledgeable on food because of her journey. She had a pancreatic tumour removed, which was 15 centimetres. She was healthy like 5 years ago. She's 30 now. And she had just one day, she was doubled over in pain, and then she ended up getting rushed in and having this tumour removed. And then because of her partner really researched like what she should be eating and all the rest of it, she didn't have any chemo or anything like that. She just... changed her diet completely. But 12 months later, she had secondary liver cancer, and they were going to cut part of her liver out. And then 10 days, she just completely fasted with alkalized juices. When she went back 10 days later, it had gone. But they're saying an anatomy side of it, they didn't want to know why, how she'd done it. Which just blows my mind, you know. This is what in the medical profession, it's like somebody's a specialist in that, somebody's a specialist in that, but nobody actually communicates, do they? That's why the holistic side of things is so important, isn't it? So she's very knowledgeable on food, and so she does that side of it. And I do the meditation and the yoga, and we have people come in doing the breath work and sound, and we go cold water swimming, and we had a samba class. We've got one of those this weekend as well. Perfect. But yeah, it
sounds like I think you invested in it, and you've gone on, and you're still on your healing journey, and you're keen to take people with you, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, I'm loving it. So yeah, we're planning to do these like once a month for the weekend now, and then looking at Thailand in next year as well. Perfect. And yeah, wherever it takes us. The aim, the goal is to have Eat, Pray, Self-Love retreats all around the world. Lovely. Venues that we can hire out to different people who want to do their own retreats. So That's the goal.
Watch this space.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate you taking your time out straight from your yoga, and
I'm
talking to me.
I must say, I'm going to Dubai on next Wednesday for 3 weeks.
Okay.
Believe it or not, to host the fan zone in football.
A bit different.
Hilarious,
A bit different. Yeah, no, that'll be fun though.
Yeah, it will be fun. The place where I'm doing it is like in a big venue called Phileas Fogg's in Dubai.
Okay.
And there's some crazy like football fans there. It's like stepping back into
football
that world.
world.
Yeah. But it will be a lot of fun.
You probably never really left actually. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it will be, the World Cup's great, isn't it?
It is.
You know, to
bring people together and enjoy.
Yeah. And it does look like a lot of fun. I miss the kids because they're not coming with me. But
oh, are they not?
no, because I'm going to be working, so not every day, but...
I'm surprised if I knew you're going to Dubai. The kids could join you in Dubai. They'd have fun there.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So that's an interesting spin on things, isn't
look
it?
at that.
But so...
But thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah.
And we'll catch up soon, I'm sure.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So I hope you enjoyed listening to Leanne Brown on the podcast. There were so many inspirational things she talked about on what was quite a remarkable healing journey. One thing I noticed is she had a multimodality healing journey, not just based on one thing, multiple things like yoga, therapy, talking to friends. And one of the things she mentioned was understanding her attachment style. She mentioned she was anxious attachment. So I thought it'd be useful to share with you guys what the attachment styles are and what you can learn from it and how potentially it can help you moving forward. So there are 4 attachment styles. There's anxious attachment, like Leanne mentioned. There's secure attachment. There's dismissive avoidant. And there's disorganized or fearful avoidant attachments. So these 4 attachments are related a little bit to our childhood experiences and our adult experiences, and we get molded by them a little bit. So number 1, if we go to secure attachment is when we are healthy in our relationships. We have equal relationships that are honoring of each other with good, healthy communication. It comes from a healthy family, of course, and I want to say, don't get caught up on any of the 4 attachments. Sometimes with different people, we can display different attachments. They're slightly fluid, but in general, we will lean towards one. So that's secure. So the second one is anxious attachment. With anxious attachment, you're high anxiety and you're low avoidance. What does it mean? It means that you're going to cling to relationships even when they're potentially unhealthy for you. Red flags may come, warning signs may be there, friends may be saying it's not healthy for you. But maybe you had a key caregiver, a parent, who wasn't there for you earlier on. Maybe you are too anxious about keeping the relationship going and fixing it, no matter what's going on. In an anxious attachment, you stay longer than you really should, really for your emotional and physical detriment. So if you are in that anxious attachment, what can you do? You can acknowledge that's where you are and understand red flags. Don't ignore red flags. Don't ignore warning signs. Please do boundaries and please respect yourself at least equally in the relationship, if not prioritize yourself. The third one's avoidant dismissive. It's low anxiety, high avoidance. Now, if you have this, you struggle to be in intimate relationships. Okay, you may come across self-sufficient, independent, and actually may be fantastic in your career. But the slight problem is you push people away. You actually probably think everyone's going to let you down. And this mask, this distance doesn't help you get intimate relationships. So my advice for you in these situations is try and build safe, secure relationships that when you want to run, you don't run. You take space and you come back in, encouraging that healthy communication and that vulnerability and intimacy that you really want. The final one is fearful avoidant or a disorganized attachment, and that's high anxiety, high avoidance. Now, this is quite a perplexing attachment because you both want to be close to someone, but you also want distance, and you find relationships confusing. You think they're probably going to fail, and you find yourself in this exhausted, in a conflict, emotional, overwhelming situation, especially when you find someone you like or could love. The best way to go through this is probably looking for psychological help, trusting your friends, looking to try and equip yourself that when you're getting these 2 different emotions, you realize this may be from the past, This may be from an uncaring, disorganized relationship with your parents, but you can reorganize it now. You can have healthy, structured communications, not being fearful of being abandoned and not getting overly too close or looking for love bombing, which is often the mixture you can find yourself in. So these are the 4 attachment styles. Which one do you find yourself associating with? It gets interesting because attachment styles can interact with different attachment styles differently, and we'll definitely talk about that in future posts. So I trust you enjoyed Leanne's podcast, and I'll see you back soon.